it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. If you'd like to join me, there's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind, flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart.
There is a river flowing, telling us we are somebody, no matter who you are, no matter how you represent yourself, you are somebody. And when we were thinking as a team who to bring forward during Black History Month, who would be inspiring figures that we could bring to this community, at the top of our list was Representative Mauree Turner from Oklahoma City, District 88, who came through being a community organizer and decided from Ardmore, Oklahoma, came to Oklahoma City, has really built an incredible community and sense of leadership. And so, as the first Muslim to be elected to the Oklahoma legislature and the first gender non-binary person elected to a state house anywhere in the United States, Representative Mauree Turner won in a landslide for District 88 to represent the district here in Oklahoma. And I was so glad to be able to meet Mauree and to talk to Mauree. And just so you know, as a non-binary person, Mauree uses pronouns, both she pronouns as well as they. I'm going to do my best to use they pronouns. And I want to talk a little bit about that in just a moment, because a lot of people don't really understand what gender non-binary means. What is that? So I thought I'd take a moment at the beginning before the interview just to say a few words about that. The binary is to have two different parts. So in our case, in our language, in our society, male and female, it's often considered the gender binary. But not everybody identifies with those two genders, or who they are isn't represented by those two gender titles. And so it's important to realize that this is not something new. This is not a fad that just started recently. This has been going on for millennia in different cultures and different societies all over the world, including here in North America. It's important to know that non-binary folks are not confused about what their gender identity is. Some people have asked, is non-binary the same thing as transgender? Which is a great question. And under the larger umbrella of transgender, those things that transcend our typical gender ideas, certainly non-binary identity fits into that. But most transgender folks that we know who are considered transgender or who identify as such have a gender identity of either male or female that do fit into the gender binary and should be treated like any other male or female, man or woman. as the case may be. Now, those of us who continue to identify with the gender that we were given at birth and were born with, and our biological gender, like myself, are called cisgender. That's another word that's made its way into the lexicon of our country and our community. And if you don't know what a person's preferred pronouns are, the most polite thing to do is to ask. And I understand it can be awkward to ask somebody what pronouns to use to refer to them. And I wanted to share something that means a lot to me. I realized a while back, despite the fact that it can be awkward to try to use sometimes pronouns that I'm not familiar with, or to ask somebody what pronouns they prefer, I realized my discomfort as a cisgendered person in those moments is truly just moments of discomfort for me, who is generally very comfortable in the world. And I realized that I'm willing to put up with some awkwardness and some discomfort myself if it actually is going to help someone else who lives with that every day, all the time, the awkwardness, the discomfort, really a struggle to survive in this culture. So my and your awkwardness for these fleeting moments when we ask or try to use pronouns differently is a small price for us to pay, a small sacrifice for me to make if it can make someone else feel welcome and included. I hope you feel the same way, and I hope you're doing your best to do the same. Now, it's important for non-binary people to be able to live and dress and have their gender respected at work, in school, as well as in other public spaces. And you and I can be a part of making that happen with these simple things like how we use pronouns. And also understanding that things that are often normal for and easy for those of us who are in the typical gender binary can be even life-threatening sometimes for somebody who's not. So just imagine just knowing which bathroom to use sometimes, knowing which will be safe and where a person will be free of verbal attack and possibly even physical attack is a daily concern and struggle sometimes for transgender and non-binary folks. So we need to support our non-binary siblings to be able to use the restroom that feels right to them, where they can be safe and feel completely welcome wherever they are. To that end, Representative Turner has proposed a number of different legislation, particularly 2107, 2108, and 2109, each one to help address one or another issue. One has to do with allowing there to be a marker for gender that's not just male and female on official forms here in Oklahoma. Another one has to do with putting gender non-binary language into bills and other things going forward from 2021 in our state, and some other legislation. Here's what you need to know: none of those are going to make it out of committee. They've been told, Representative Turner's been told, no, these will not be debated, these will not come to the floor. So they've been shot down in committee. Now, at the same time, State Senator Warren Hamilton has introduced Oklahoma Senate Bill 676, which is making its way through committees and very likely to be debated on the floor to become law. And this is an anti-transgender bill that would affect young people and families. So keep your eyes open for that, Senate Bill 676, and let's do what we can to support our transgender and non-binary siblings, friends, family members, community members, and citizens as we go forward here in Oklahoma. And now, with no further ado, I would like to share with you an interview I had on Friday with Representative Turner, who I truly have respected and valued from a distance for a long time, but this is the first time we've been able to talk one-on-one, and I can tell you that Representative Turner made their way into my heart as more than just a representative, but somebody who I find very endearing and compelling and bright and somebody I look up to and respect and look forward to a long relationship with. The conversation begins with a question I asked about Black history. Here it is.
To ask you about Black history, since it's Black History Month, and just your thoughts on Black history, and if it's had a positive impact on you and your life and career.
Absolutely. I think I remember back to Black History Month and what it looked like to celebrate growing up in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I remember specifically that the only time I really got to learn about, I guess, Black history, right, so to speak, it was when I was learning from my mother and my grandmother. It wasn't something I was necessarily taught in school. And so Black History Month for me holds a very kind of special place because it's a place that it wasn't the only time that I learned my Black history, but it was a really great time to come into community and see community celebrate, right, so many things, and to see how people who aren't necessarily Black learn so much about Black culture within February, right, and learn that most of the common day things that we use, right, so like stoplights, refrigerators, things like that, right, come from Black creators, right, and how it has really shaped American culture. And so Black History Month holds a special place in my heart. I remember growing up and doing Black History Bowls at our local community center, and I think to not only get to watch it happen, right? My grandmother was the first Black nurse in our hometown, and so to watch it happen, to see my family be a part of it, and I guess now to kind of pick up that torch feels like a lot of weight on my shoulders, but also it is really a humbling experience. So yes, I absolutely love Black History Month, and it means so much to me deeply.
That's wonderful, in part because you now are a member of that Black history. Certainly in Oklahoma and truly in America, you are a shining example and an inspiring figure within Black history in our country and in our state. And so that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have you with us this morning. And so I really thank you for being with us. Can you mention a few of your role models?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, I'd be remiss to say to not mention my mother and my grandmother. My mother particularly was the first community organizer that I ever met, the first lobbyist that I ever met, right? When she was lobbying on behalf of me, and when it came to public education and making sure that everybody around us, right, our community was cared for, our neighbors' children were cared for, right? It was great to always have that parent that kids could talk to if they needed to, and I don't know, it was just community organizing and that community outreach and that selfless love was really what helped shape my life. And I think we can all say, like we have really big role models, right? Whether that was Barack Obama or Mahalia Jackson, right? Or folks like this, right? Rosa Parks, but truly at the basis of my being and my core, my mother and my grandmother are my biggest role models.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you mentioned your mom. You come from an interfaith family. I understand one of your parents was Baptist and the other one Muslim. Can you say a little bit about that, growing up in an interfaith family and then your choice to follow in the Islamic tradition?
Yes. Yeah. So grew up, my mom was Baptist, grew up attending a Baptist church, my dad Muslim. And I don't know if a lot of people know, but a lot of Black people, a lot of African Americans specifically, find their way to Islam via the carceral system. And my father was incarcerated while I was a child, and he converted before I was born. And so they raised us with principles from both Islam and Christianity. But yet again, I grew up singing in a Black Baptist choir. And I think around the time I was, going into middle school, my mom was just like, you should be able to go out and explore other religions, right? So I was always going to youth hour with other friends, right? Non-denominational churches, like Methodist churches, and just kind of learning these different aspects and yet again, community service and service for those around you, right? And taking care of people around you was something that just, a lesson that I learned from my mom at a young age, and something that really just helps drive me. And that was like one of my favorite things about being able to go and experience different religions, right? And to learn how they cared for community. And so I guess throughout this middle school time, I was looking around and talking with my friends and seeing like what they were going through and what that looked like, right? Because I didn't attend my first mosque, right, until I went off to uni. Because I remember the first time, so I had made the decision that Islam was for me, right? I think around that middle school time, maybe around maybe around 8th grade or so. But I think when I first actually told somebody that I was Muslim, one of my dear friends, they looked at me and they were like, "Oh, you're one of those towel heads." This was at a time where I never covered my hair, right? I feel like I've always dressed pretty modestly. That's just kind of me. And this was at a time where I'd never covered my hair, and to see how prejudiced and how families build on that, right? And how people use painted language and don't know what it means, right? And so I made an active decision to not tell anybody, right? Until I was in uni. And I think even at that, maybe around my sophomore year of college, because I had told 2 friends around the same time, and I speak to neither of them anymore. And so that for me, it was really kind of formative. It helped me realize at a young age that sometimes it doesn't matter how much relational organizing you do, that there will be some people who don't come along on that journey with you, right? But also helps me realize that relational organizing gets a lot of work done. It's how you change the hearts and minds of your family and friends, right? And I would be remiss to say I wouldn't want to give up on something like that, right? And so my journey to Islam and around Islam has been a long one, and I'm very appreciative of it, and that understanding and that grace that my mother and my Baba gave me, right, to be able to explore. And that's a privilege in itself. A lot of people don't get that. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And I'm curious about where you draw your strength because you come from a number of you bring number of identities forward that are not often affirmed and sometimes are actively denigrated in our society. As a gender non-binary person, someone who identifies as both Black and Muslim and gender diverse and queer, I've heard you say in interviews. So where do you draw your strength, especially in Oklahoma, which is not seen as one of the most understanding or progressive places?
I guess from a few different places. The communities that I get to advocate on behalf of, right, the communities that I get to advocate with and for, is really, I think, a good portion of where I get a lot of my strength from, right? I could have a rough day, but I am doing some really good work, right? Me being in the Oklahoma legislature, if I don't get a bill passed, right, in this first session, we're still starting conversations that are probably years beyond where the legislature is, just putting it plainly, right? Having conversations that people here have never even thought about. Understanding that it's more than just me, right? That I'm here because of community. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for community. And I mean, long before and far outside of the campaign to win House District 88, right? But community at every single aspect of my life was what carried me as a young queer person. And I think a lot of young queer people will tell you that I never saw my life past 20. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to envision that. I grew up in a time where I was watching things like the Matthew Shepard story, the story of Brandon Tina, right? And bringing that history of Marsha P. Johnson, right? And what that looked like at the height of AIDS in America, and what it looked like and what America seemed to show us how we cared for the LGBTQ2S plus community, right? And it wasn't good, right? And so I couldn't envision my life too far. And so it took a lot of learning and growing. And so pulling that strength from the understanding that sometimes I will be the first or the few in a room, right? But we do this work because we are continuously pushing the door open for more community members to come and join us. That's where I pull a good portion of my strength from. So
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you truly seem to live as someone who's called. You're called to this position, and you recognize the import of the work that you're doing on other people in the community, and it really shows. And I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward, and I know many of us are, to seeing what you're called to as your career unfolds and as the years go by. I'm thrilled to hear you say that you couldn't imagine your life past 20, and then to see where you are now and to be able to imagine what you're going to be capable of doing really is something that gives me great hope. I'm curious about how your faith informs the work that you do.
that's a good one. I think everybody's faith should deeply motivate them, no matter what they are, right? I think at the core being a faith, it is to help community, to make sure your community is taken care of. I love that about Islam, right? Is that I have my faith and my walk, right? And I get to do that deep work to decolonize my religion. And I think that's something that more people should try to do. It plays a big role in every part of my being because it is about community. And it's about making sure that you take care of yourself so that you can take care of community. Right?
If you're praying 5 times a day, has that had some impact on the schedule, in your schedule with the legislature? I mean, how do you handle that, praying 5 times a day with the legislative schedule and probably not a lot of support around your faith there?
Yeah, for me, so we've got a couple prayers during the day while I'm in chambers, and not like in chambers, I just mean like at the Capitol, should I say. And so as of right now, we'll see what that looks like as session progresses. But as of right now, all my prayer times are actually like while I'm in my office. So it works out pretty well right now. And when you add up all the prayers, it's like 30 minutes out of your day. And when you think about how you have 24 hours to be able to make a difference in the magnitude of work that I do, right, and that I wanted to be in, it was a little bit easier to take it more seriously for me anyway. So as of right now, my prayer is not impeded by the work that I do. So.
Yeah. Good. I have a question. There was this issue on social media around one of the folks in the chamber taking video of you during the Pledge of Allegiance and then making a post and trying to stir up controversy around that. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on how you handled that with such dignity, going to talk to the person directly and everything I've seen about that. I'd be curious your thoughts on that, or what we could learn from that. And I was particularly taken by something you said about critical thinking, that we all need to be thinking critically, and that's important in terms of supporting for marginalized people in society, but also for those supporting marginalized people to be thinking critically. That's something that means a lot here in our church community. Thinking critically is part of what we hold up as very, very important. I'd love for you to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So I guess for everybody watching that doesn't know, so what happened on the very first day of session, or no, this was the second day of session. Sorry. We had the Pledge of Allegiance. I stood up. I looked at the flag. I wasn't on my phone or anything. But later, after I got out of chambers, after we left chambers, I got a call from a constituent that let me know somebody, like one of my colleagues, had taken a photo of me on the House floor and had posted. And so I am a community organizer. I understand that in order to make any kind of change, you come to a person and you talk to them, right? It's about being able to understand where people are coming from. And so after I read the post that the representative made and read the comments that were shared, I went to talk to my colleague in their office because we work very close to each other. So, and then I found out after that not only is just this another person that I serve with in the House of Representatives, but it's also leadership. They are also leadership. And so my thing about it is that one of the things that I pulled from it is that we are operating in a time where critical thinking is not required of everybody and hasn't been required of everyone, right? But we're elected, right? We are elected to be in these positions because our communities think that we can critically think to take care of them. We do not represent a monolith. And so we had this conversation about what that meant. And when I say we, I mean the folks in the community that continue to ask about it, right? And so for me, it's that if we do this work together, we have to work together for X amount of years, right? And if we can't come and talk to each other about our differences, if we have to take it to social media, then that means that we aren't critically thinking about what we're actually doing, right? That we are only using inflammatory language to do harm to communities rather than actually representing people. And so, like I said, we represent a vast majority of people, and they come from all different walks of life. And at the very least, we should be making sure that we are taking care of folks like that and having those critical conversations. But to also be an an elected position within this elected body means that we are charged even more so to be able to critically think about our words and our actions. And so for me, that's what I want for my representation, right? For my leadership, as someone who's critically thinking about how their words mean things. That's what I was taught those things at a young age, was that our words mean things. And they have the power to make and break some of the best and some of the worst relationships that we can have. And so I made sure that I tried to impress upon the representative the magnitude of that. I think at its basis is that the lack of critical thinking about the words and the actions that we choose leads to situations like the insurrection that happened at our nation's capital. Because that post not only put myself in danger, but also put all of my colleagues at danger, and it also put my family at danger, who I don't get to bring to the Capitol with me every day. There are some people who just don't critically think. But in this case, I believe my colleague knew what they were doing. They knew what they were trying to incite. They thought about their actions before they did them, and they just didn't care.
I think that's really important. And just the fact that somebody at her level of government would not, if she had a question about your allegiance to the flag or something related to that, that she would come and talk to you first as a colleague and say, can you help me understand this, rather than blowing it up on social media before even having a single conversation with you. Yeah. Seems to be just irresponsible on so many levels. So your model of going and sitting down with her face to face and asking the questions just showed a complete counter example of how we can be in relationship.
She did make it a point of saying, thank you for coming to my office and talking to me. That's more than I have offered you. So I appreciate that.
Nice. Let me ask you about something that's been important to me for many years now, and something I'm working on actively in the community with other colleagues, is the reparations for what happened in 1921 here in Tulsa. And I'm curious what you think of this concept of reparations.
I am absolutely all here, not only for the conversation of reparations, but the actual action of reparations, and all for community organizing around it too.
Nice. Thank you. Let me ask you kind of a final question, and that is, how can we as a community support you? We know that you know how hardworking you are, what a skilled politician and community organizer you are. How can we support, even from Tulsa, but we have members all over Oklahoma and around the country. How can we support you so that the things that you care about, we use our whatever agency we have to bring those things into the center of the conversation to create positive change?
For sure. That's a really good question. And I was able to talk to some folks on the phones yesterday about it, but I think a couple of things, right? Is that if you are in Oklahoma, when it comes to policy work and things like that, I absolutely love it when people call and have constructive feedback, right? Because sometimes people don't have constructive, they just have feedback. So I absolutely love getting phone calls and emails about like what's going on. And if there's a piece of legislation that I should be watching that has like flown past me or something like that. I love being able to, because that's one of my big things is that I am still a community organizer. And I love to be able to talk to community and to see how we can continue to push the narrative, right? And to make this a more equitable society. So being able to continuously call, email, and when COVID is over, inshallah, to be able to show up, because there are a lot of young people who want to get involved. There are folks of all ages, right, that want to get involved. And so if you are in Oklahoma, or if you're watching this and you're in Oklahoma City specifically, and there are any kind of skills that you want to learn about a campaign, or any kind of skills that you have that you would like to be able to contribute to a campaign, I would absolutely love that too. And if there's anything that you just kind of want to learn, because that's, I believe heavily in being able to teach people the skills that will make them an asset to any other campaign, right? That they can take with them anywhere. And I will try my best to train you on them.
Great. That's perfect. And I know there are some young people within my community and people of all ages who you would be a fantastic mentor for them, particularly for our young people who are interested in creating community change and political change. So we'd love to. I imagine there's some folks who'd like to support you that way, and in the other ways that you mentioned. So thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for being with us for this interview. You are an inspiring figure in Oklahoma history, in American history, and certainly the subset of all that, which is Black history. And I'm just thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk with you, and it was truly an honor to be asked to be a part of this. So.
Thank you for joining us. For 100 years, All Souls in Tulsa has been a beacon of this free faith. We offer our services and programs freely online for all those who are interested. You can help us to do this by making a one-time gift today or a reoccurring pledge. We really appreciate you joining us and being a part of helping us make All Souls in Tulsa what it is. Thank you.
Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Keep on loving boldly. We're gonna keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly, never turning back, never turning back. Keep on moving forward. Oh, gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back, 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 never turning